We will have, or we would like to have a Q&A at the end of this. So if you would like to ask Josh Woods or Sara Henning a question about their writing or anything, please post your question in the comments. When we get there, we'll announce that we're going to have our Q&A, and me, Joshua, and Greg will read your questions to them, and we can listen to them answer. So that will be at the end. So save your questions for the end. So now we're going to hear Sara read first. So I'll introduce her. Sara Henning is the author of View from True North, which was published by us, Southern Illinois University Press, in 2018. She's the co-winner of the 2017 Crab Orchard Series in Poetry Open Competition Award. She's also the winner of the 2019 High Plains Book Award, which was shortlisted by Jacquard Press for the 2018 Julie Suk Award. She's also the author of the upcoming Terra Incognita, which is going to be published by Ohio University Press in 2022. Very excited for that to come out. And that's already won a prize. It's the 2021 Hollis Summers Poetry Prize. So congratulations to her for that. She's also the recipient of the Crazyhorse Lynda Hull Memorial Poetry Prize, the Poetry Society of America's George Bogan Memorial Award, the Sewanee, saying that right, Sewanee Writers Conference Tennessee Williams Scholarship, and the Allen Ginsberg Poetry Award. Her work has also been published or is forthcoming in journals such as Quarterly Rest, Crab Orchard Review, Witness, Meridian, and the Cincinnati Review. Her work has also appeared in several notable anthologies, including South Dakota in Poems, Wild Gods, The Ecstatic in Contemporary Poetry and Prose, and Women Write Resistance, Poets Resist Gender Violence. Henning teaches at SFA University, Stephen F. Austin State University in Texas, Nacogdoches, Texas, which is also where I got my BFA. So alum, go Jacks. And she also serves as poetry editor for SFA University Press. So please give your attention to Sara Henning while she reads from View from True North. Snap, snap, snap.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Greg. I don't know, you guys. Today it feels like a kind of a homecoming of sorts. Allison and our wonderful John Tribble gave me a chance first to have some work in Crab Orchard Review back in 2014, and there was a follow-up there in 2019. And I've always felt such kind of love and support from all of the wonderful things that you know, that Allison and John, when he was with us, you know, I know I personally miss John constantly when I think about the kind of literary citizen he was, all the things he did for writers, all the things he did to help me when View from True North was taken. But everything that's happening at SIU Carbondale is just an exemplary example of how to teach students how to be responsible, compassionate writers. And so to have work come out in that journal first, a journal that I have loved since I really feel like I became a writer. It was always a bucket list for me to be in Crab Orchard Review. And then to have won the Crab Orchard series in 2017 was just a dream. And so to add on to that, Lauren was one of my students at Stephen F. Austin, and it has been such a joy to watch her blossom and to watch her work come to pass, and to have her co-hosting this is such a treat and such a special experience for me. So I'd like to gear my remarks today around the idea of gratitude and how sometimes gratitude can feel textured, multi-textured in certain ways. So I'm going to read a few poems. I think this for first time around from View from True North. And when I read again, I'm going to read some things from that I had otherwise published in Crab Orchard Review. But so View from True North is a collection exploring a family that has legacies in multiple arenas. Some domestic violence, alcoholism, but with a love that sort of pulses and penetrates kind of underneath the surface of that. I think part of gratitude sometimes can be notions of regret, can be notions of regret for the things we lost, which translates in certain ways to appreciation for the things that we have or the things that we once had. And so I'm going to read an elegy for you today. And for me, elegy is very much fraught with the I don't think so conflicting notions of gratitude and regret. But I'm hoping that those two become apparent in the poem I'm going to read. So, my grandfather suffered a condition called Korsakoff's syndrome, and it very much mimics Alzheimer's, but it is a condition caused by a thiamine deficiency from many, many years of alcoholism. And so this is called Rain Elegy. July and my grandfather sentries the garage, watching for the unchained repetition of water. He's fluent in monsoon trough, jet streams, every convergent zone flashing on the weather channel at the top of the hour. He shifts to the window, expecting the sky's dry burn to perjure its oath not to wail and dirge, to release its blue, humid and irreverent as the sweatshirt he's worn every day since March, his brain hostile to encoding the seasonal turn. He waits for rain like the rapture, like he waits for his wife's poached eggs on Sunday, so raw and supple they radiate shamelessly into the buttered rinds of toast, his brain like the yolk's molten seams. His memories untether into these tarns of silk, lush as they allied and harden. Every day of this drought he waits, won't leave the television to eat, to steep his ripe clothes in the washing machine. For the sun-breached flood might unleash its grief to another man's ether, might split the sky with a water too brutal and strange to suffer its way anywhere but home. The truth of them. Each spring, the Bradford pear tree's merciless aroma of sex. No matter the hardwood mulch trafficked for pine straw or my grandmother's shearing, the smell pulses through the yard like cats skulking the trenches of grass islands, rubbing their spare bodies against sun-blissed bark. 50, testing positive for chlamydia. She believed the pearl stain on her underwear was some vestige of her body refusing trespass. Grandmother's doctor asking, is there a chance your husband has been unfaithful? As if faith had ever been the fabric swathing her body to his body. As if infection came from a Holiday Inn toilet, his lie like semen swill staining the humid reach of air and pear flesh. And when she asks again and he pitches her cage of zebra finches down the stairs, the cage's door, like the truth of them, unhinges its gravity lock. Birds mated for life, crash landing into railing. Birds jeweled with contusions, accelerating with heat. After he's gone to bed, she'll turn to their map of scat. Tracks of creamy urate she'll trail as she calls to them, panic constellating the carpet. Because love is not always vengeful, she'll wait all night for a single song. Years later, she'll read somewhere that neurons fire in similar patterns when a bird is singing or sleeping, an adaptation more primal than sweet. This need to make patterns, to build meaning when hope no longer consoles us, is how we survive. When she finds them in the kitchen curtains, shocks of feathers nestled into French cotton, they're still breathing. Even hurt, their wings refuse not to touch. When hope no longer consoles us, we unhinge, we crash land, we sing in our sleep. How else, after all, will we master our mating song? One more. My grandfather was someone who raised me. My father died when I was a little girl in a fire. And in many ways, I would call my grandfather my father, which means that in many ways, I call myself a second generation child of an alcoholic. I loved my grandfather the way many people love addicted people, in a conflicting way, but with intense love, conflicted love. The kind of love that when the person passes from you, shows itself everywhere. And so my grandfather, in addition to being an alcoholic, was also a closeted homosexual man. After he died, we found in his journals that he had loved men since he knew how to love. And there was no way during his time period for him to say that, having been raised in a very Christian home, having been a military man for years before any of the things were placed into law that, you know, that people couldn't be discriminated against. And, you know, that made me think about how do we hold empathy for the people who hurt us, who we intensely love? And how do we negotiate the sheer sadness we feel for when they can't be who they want to be? So, letter to my grandfather who lived 2 lives. Your pocket of half-moon chuckles candy crushes between summer's hustle and your suit coat as you dash between Greyhound and bus depot, a slurry of urine and body odor hailing its tang like another nude hymnal. A hallelujah that grieves with the heat all body, turning even candy into ribbed lines of luscious. The jelly all grit and sweet, like a boy's skinned knees, flecks of mica sheening from thick sugar scabs only the most reckless can reap by the end of a hard season. It hurts my teeth just to look at that row of pleasure tethered in plastic you tear with your fingers. Teach me to slip between my lips and savor. Love tastes like cherry stripped of its pulp and sour, like licorice dark and silk, as a man left, oh, the rush before the wreck, to sweeten, then drag what's left of his body home. Thanks.
Wow, thank you so much, Sara Henning, for those beautiful, moving, sentimental poems. Those were just gorgeous, beautiful. Snap, snap, snap. Applause and snaps for Sara Henning and her beautiful words. So now Josh Woods is going to read for us, and I'm going to give it over to Greg to introduce him for us.
Hello, everyone. Josh Woods is an author, editor, professor, and podcaster. He loves monsters, myth, storytelling, comedy, combat, and crafts. His debut book of stories, Oh Monstrous World, Press 53, 2019, won the International Book Award for Fiction Short Story. His novel, The Black Palace, is an epic of gothic horror action-adventure. He has edited 3 anthologies of fiction and has published genre and literary short stories in numerous journals, magazines, and collections, in addition to having published essays of creative nonfiction, writing craft, and peer-reviewed scholarship. His podcast, The Monster Professor, explores the role of monsters in literature, myth, film, folklore, and pop culture. His other awards include Outstanding Full-Time Faculty Member of the Year, Press 53 Open Awards for Genre Fiction, and nominations for the Penn Robert W. Bingham Prize for Debut Short Story Collection, The Best of the Net, and multiple Pushcart Prize nominations, among others. He is a full-time professor of English in Illinois and originally hails from Kentucky. Everybody, please give it up for Josh Woods.
Hey, thank you, Greg. And thank you to Crab Orchard Review. Thank you, Allison. It's great to be here. And like Sara, I see several generations of what would you say, literary citizenship, Sara? I think that's a good way to put it. I had the honor of working with Crab Orchard Review while I was a student there at SIUC. I got to do some assistant editing and some interning there. And I really commend this next generation for picking up that flag and running with it. You know, it's not a lot of literary journals are doing so well, or some are, a lot are not, and you wouldn't succumb to that, or you wouldn't let Crab Orchard go with the changing times. You started this virtual reading, and I think that's something to be really proud of. And Greg, it's good to see you, a former student of mine, continuing your own journey there. So again, it's a great honor to be here, and I'm going to read an excerpt from a story from my book, Oh Monstrous World. I think it's a longish story, so I'm going to pick up somewhere in the middle of it. My book, Oh Monstrous World, I'm blurring myself out there. Maybe I need a creepier background. I do the monster professor. I do creepy stuff. Let me find a more fitting background. Yeah, that's better. Okay. This is the house from John Carpenter's 1978 Halloween behind me, and so I think that's more fitting. So on that note, I'm going to read from a story called A Theory of Game, A Theory of Horror. I'm going to pick up in this story. So up to this point, well, it begins with a guy explaining his idea for a video game. He's just flat out talking about, I want to do this game. I worked with a programmer, it didn't work out, but here's how the game would go. And as he explains what the game will be like, the lines between this virtual reality and reality begin to blur. like the lines around my head are blurring in front of that house. They begin to blur, and we get, well, maybe that's enough. We'll see if you get see what you make out of it. At this point, this guy is describing the moment in a game, and I think I should clarify that his idea for a game is something like one of the masked slasher horror films in which you play the killer. And at this point, he has talked his way into a house where a babysitter is, and completely unaware of him. At the edge of the kitchen door, I hear Connie bright and clear now. She walks back and forth over the meal she is preparing, still talking on the phone, not about boys or sex or gossip or shopping, but about grants and scholarships, majors, transfer credits, the sensible elements of her all too assumed future. I didn't expect that of her, but I should have known. And there is no way to know whether she will happen to be facing my direction if I turn the corner and enter the kitchen with her. I could just peek quickly, but that would alert her just the same as if she were facing my way. And it would be sheepish of me, an action suited for the timid, for the lambs that ought to be painted across such doorways. So I boldly go. I stand in the kitchen with her. Her back is to me. She works the bread on the countertop with her phone pinched to her ear by a shrugged shoulder. The refrigerator beside me kicks on audibly, but this does not garner any reaction out of her. She has worked as a babysitter in this house for many months now. She's used to the sounds it makes, to the sounds it does not make. Now is the time for me to ready my weapon. But this time I forgot to select one, or to have one randomly selected for me. I'm empty-handed. Next to the refrigerator, on the counter, far from her but within reach of me, there's a trivet this time in the game, but there is a block of kitchen knives. So I take a larger handle at the top of the block and slide it out, imagining that the sound it makes has a slick sheen to the ear, and that, though my drawing of the knife actually makes no sound, it ought to be there in the video game, so it makes the sound indeed. Then I step closer to her. She laughs about something said to her over the phone. I can hear the muffled voice of the person on the other end. That's how close I am to Connie. This gore will not be unnatural, merely inevitable. As we are reminded in apocalyptic narrative of poet Rodney Jones, listen, only a thin layer of skin keeps us from squirting into the world. The only question is which world that will be. But I don't raise my knife just yet. I want to stand this close for a moment longer. Her hair is right under my nose. I close my eyes and try to smell her slowly, and I do. The video game won't be able to include such smells, and I realize now what a tragedy that is. So I pause the game. I take in through my nostrils what no one else will ever be able to. My nostrils are outside of time, and they have life in them. And when that's over, when I open my eyes again, she's looking right up at me. Her face is frozen, her eyes bright, her mouth only just beginning to tremble, the subtle beginnings of an avalanche, her mind beginning to slip from the actual world she was in to the alternate possible world she is in now. Now is when I lift the knife. I lift it above her with clear demonstration, making sure to catch our reflection in it, the both of us together, the fleeting image of the girl and the mask. The girl's face is so familiar in that quick mirror, but my mask shuffles through 1,000 faces, faster and faster at random. My mask is the Iroquois false face mask, the six-eyed Oni mask, the black mourning veil, the red speaker of the sea mask.
I have technical problems. Is here the service center?
So sorry, John.
A service center of types. It's a literary service center, I think. Was that one of the voices in the game? This would happen in this game too. The lines of reality are slipping, and that's the Zoom verse as well. A motorcycle helmet. The Frankenstein's creation. Faster and faster, the Dia de los Muertos sugar skull mask, a drape of change, the mask of its papelo, the joint surgeon face shield mask, the carnival grotesque mask, the man in the iron mask, faster and faster, a mask of purple and thorn, the two-faced mask of Janus, the great bassinet helmet, the mask of Nartheotep, an eldritch mask I cannot name, a mask that has no face but is not blank, a mask of all colors, a mask of none. I can't keep up with. They shuffle so fast. I can't help but watch the glitching permutations, mesmerized, my face scattering before me like an uncountable flock. But she hits me with something heavy in the solar plexus, even before she screams, and she slides away to the side. I'm hurt, my in-game health meter drops, but I'll be fine. I catch the back of her sweater, a pale wedding-like color, before she manages to flee the kitchen. I have a good grip on it, so I take just a second to breathe once or twice. She had knocked some of the air out of me. I see what she hit me with, a cast iron trivet lies on the floor. Connie had reached out and found what didn't exist in this session, and she used it against me. She's innovative. She's screaming at the children, telling them to leave through the front door, to run to the neighbor's house. She doesn't tell them to call the cops, which would have just added further confusion to their little minds, only to run and save themselves. With her caught in my hand, I bring the knife up for a slice into her tenderloin along her spine, but she turns and makes a grab for the knife. Though she gets hold of it too, that will make no difference. I have leverage here and can bring the blade down on her regardless. But she guides it down with me, and we end up cutting through the fabric of her sweater together like a cake. Now I just have a ball of sweater in my hand, and she's free, and she takes off down the hallway, away from the front door, away from the direction the children are fleeing. She must be trying to bait me away from them, the babysitter with the heart of gold. I follow her, not with a rush because of the phantom ankle, but with a steady march. She turns a corner, making clattering noises, making the sound of terror that isn't so much a scream anymore as an ignoble bleat, which is unfortunate for this moment, aesthetically. I give her just a second to stop that noise, which I do not want to hear, and then I continue, make my way around the corner too, and I don't see her or hear her now, but to my left is a staircase leading up to the second floor. And to my right, the back door now standing wide open. Which way? This is where true game theory comes into play. What we have in this moment is a zero-sum game with two players, both of us with what is called imperfect information. We can call this scenario the game of Connie's ubiquity. She must be somewhere, her position being both exact and unknown, and she can be in only one of two directions. Did Connie open the back door and flee outside as it appears? Or did she open the back door as a diversion and instead flee upstairs? Should I go outside or upstairs? A zero-sum game with two players and two options creates a strategic form game matrix of 4 alternate possible worlds. 1. I go outside, and Connie went outside. For Connie, her choice would have been left obvious to me, relinquishing her advantage afforded by my imperfect information. In this alternate possible world, I have time to spot her, catch her, and kill her. I win. Scenario 2. I go outside, but Connie went upstairs. For Connie, this would be the ideal scenario, the purpose of her possible diversion. In this alternate possible world, I waste time trying to find where she went outside, much more time than I would have spent searching the enclosed upper floor of the house. In that uncertain time, 10 minutes, maybe more, Connie could take numerous defensive actions or alternate escape routes before I finally make my way back to the house and up the stairs, and I probably lose. Scenario 3. I go upstairs and Connie went upstairs. For Connie, this was her necessary gamble in hopes of the better scenario in which I'm fooled. 2. Above. In this alternate possible world, I catch her and kill her. I win. Scenario 4. I go upstairs, but Connie went outside. For Connie, this would be an unexpected move on my part, thus not one that she had prepared to take advantage of. In this alternate possible world, I search the upstairs quickly enough, then go back downstairs and outside, likely with enough time to track her, catch her, kill her. I win. Just like the Battle of Bismarck in 1943 between American and Japanese forces, there is no dominant strategy equilibrium, but through the process of eliminating dominated strategies for both of us, assuming both players are rational and that they choose intelligent options, and Connie is such a player, there does end up being a weak dominance equilibrium. North-north in 1943, upstairs right now. I run upstairs. There she is. She stands ready to fight me, for behold, here I am. I don't know what hell I'm doing on time. Is that about my time? We get that to the pausing point. Or what I do, about 15 there? What do you say? I wasn't really watching the clock.
Yeah, I think that's about, see, you started reading about 2:20. So yeah, we're at about 15.
Yeah,
so,
let's call my reading good there. How about
So
All
if
right,
you want to
that
know how
sounds
it ends, buy the book.
that? Hey, thank you, Greg.
That was an awesome reading from Josh Woods, everybody. And now we'd like to hear some more from Sara Henning. So without further ado, Sara.
It was wonderful, Josh. I loved your changing of backgrounds. That was really a lot of fun, and hearing your work was a lot of fun, and I'm excited to read your larger collection.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this idea of elegy, something that I was thinking about before. I was thinking, what happens when the people we love remind us that we too are imperfect? And so that's something that I think was the larger meditation in View from True North, which I don't know, she'll always be my kind of first book baby and first love, which is why I want to read. I thought about it just a moment ago, and I want to read one sort of last piece about survival, which I think we can maybe all think about in differing ways. So, True North, a retrospective. Don't leave me alone to my ruddy din of revelation. No. To live is not to remain luminous, light, a broken jukebox, the moon a thin-hipped stranger slow, dancing me into his hard-spun radiance all night. Don't leave me where light slicks the throats of trees, where my body is just another smoke-stung dirge of survival. In this heaven of all lines converging, hold me a while, spin me another lost song of longitude. The moon is only a half-drunk lover who, lured by orbit or his own sultry shine, is already calling me home. When we lose the people we love, when what we think of as home changes shape, changes form, takes on different permutations and combinations. What do? We survive. We grow stronger. We get strong so we carry the people we love with us. We've got the muscles and the fortitude to do it. Writing that book, writing View from True North, writing that sweet collection that I feel, if I never published another book, would have been enough. I got to explore in terra incognita. It was after my mother died in 2016 from colon cancer that I encountered the idea of what it means to sort of again renegotiate those borders. So I'd like to share a couple of poems that Allison was kind enough to publish from me, that in varying different incarnations will be forthcoming in that collection. The first one is a sonnet. It's called Mom's Eggs. It's the glistening I can't unsee now. Her eggs slipped fast into margarine. Naked, something indecent, miring the interior of Teflon. My mother, 30, palms a plastic spatula as albumin radiates the hot skillet. My first memory, 2 martyrs cracked open, then braised slow. Years later, I'm still fork deep in awakening. She's dead, and no one can teach me to pierce the grief, to catch its trigger of salt. It's a trick I can't master, that sweet spot pulsing hard, then crude, supple under a rind of char, her effigy bristles in smoke. How she loved me. I fry my eggs as if I can taste her, savor what I can scrape. I eat my failing. I kill the heat. Elegy beginning with the birth of a mountain. White County, Georgia. You believe that a mountain comes gaunt and shivering, some sleek brute born from the void of chaos. When you close your eyes, you can almost see it, each salt-glossed body rapturing itself up from the earth. Giant cow elks birthed in the middle of a gorge. You beg your mother to drive the hour to White County so you can linger at the Chevron station, staring at mountains and drinking Cokes. Around you, farmhouses lean into the September heat. They ghost the landscape, derelict, all plank and radiant tin. Small cemeteries go rogue on the side of the road. You didn't know that to love a mountain is to hold a language of violence in your mouth. Tectonic plates gashing each other. Hot magma, erosion. You aren't that kind of child. The animal sky, you once said, is love turned inside out. You are ready to coil your fingers around your binoculars, to believe in a field of view inversely proportional to their magnifying power. Ready to believe in their angular value. How many degrees will hold you, and for how long. What you see, ridges erased by haze, oaks heat threatened, radiating isoprene, gas smattering the sky, like the trees you're seized between beauty and blue's hazard, the ridge's tawny girth and the surge of the soul, so nakedly rising it could be joy or sadness. Remember, you once called the sky dusk raw. Later, you'll want a world where tumors in your mother's body mean proud mountains move within her. One more. French fries. When I say lesions in my mother's lungs, not the CT scan, like a field of musk thistle. I mean, she's haunting the drive-through at the nearest crystal, a grease slick bag of French fries enchanting the air. I mean, a nurse stitched up the port in her chest where chemo once flooded, dressed the site with surgical glue, her throat closing over the word terminal. When I was young, hard days meant cruising after school with a fast food sack between us. My mother tearing the paper to cool the shards of fever slick spud we'd crush with our molars, exhaust from the muffler thrumming through the windows, magnolia murmuring its sweet ripe song through us. I want to remember her like this, radio blaring, mother grasping fries like slivers of pleasure, miles soaked in the heat bleach of bird bones, that illicit salt. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Crab Orchard Review, for giving these poems a chance. They've changed a little from their original incarnations. Thank you, perhaps even more, for giving View from True North a home. You guys are very, very special, and I will always consider you literary family.
Thank you so much, Sara Henning and Josh Woods. Your words are so beautiful. We're so honored to have both of you, very close friends of Crab Orchard Review, to be our first readers. You'll always be our first, and so you'll be our first babies in our reading series. So we're so honored to have you there. Your readings were so great. We want to open to end this reading with some Q&A from our viewers. Viewers, I'm addressing you now. Please don't actually ask the question yourself. We, as the co-host, myself, Greg, and Josh Christian, will ask our readers the questions. So please post them in the comments, and we will take turns asking questions if you have any for the lovely Sara Henning and the wonderful Josh Woods. So we'll wait while you give your congratulations, and if you want to post your questions, go ahead. Okay, I'll read the first one for Josh. It's from Allison Joseph. Josh, how do you pace suspense in fiction?
Thank you, Allison. That's a tough question. That's a tough question. For me, I think it's, well, I guess one of the ways I teach and one of the ways that works for me in pacing suspense in fiction has a lot to do with what some writers call subtext, which is the reader knows something, and that's always a little bit different than what the character knows. And then not all characters or actors in the story know what each other knows. And so playing in that gap of those gaps of knowledge is where a lot of suspense and tension can come from as well. And so it's vital that readers know what can go wrong or what possible threats there might be coming up, or else it's not really suspense or tension. It's just seeing things happen, unless the readers know beforehand what is about to happen or what can happen. And the more gaps there are in knowledge between, like if the reader knows something the main character doesn't know, then that gap in knowledge increases some tension. If that character doesn't know what the antagonist knows, but you know what the antagonist knows, and you know the protagonist doesn't know that the antagonist knows what you know, then the tension keeps building and building. And so playing in that world of knowledge and knowledge gap, I think is key.
All right, thank you so much for that, Josh. Sarah, I believe you're next. Matt Hendrickson asks, Sarah, a lot of your poetry includes very scientific, technical terminology. Can you share your inspiration and also how much research plays a part in your writing?
Leave it to the husband to ask the hard questions, right? Thanks, Matt. No, it's a good question. I was a science major in undergraduate. During my undergraduate program at the University of Georgia, I studied genetics. And for the longest time, I didn't know if I wanted to be in the health field, whether it be a doctor or an epidemiologist. Later on, I thought about, that I felt sometimes my heart was on sort of the ground in the trenches, and I thought about being a nurse practitioner, maybe running a clinic for folks without insurance. And so I have always had that penchant for science. I also believe, and I teach my students, that we are all, those of us who write, we become lay philosophers, lay, ornithologists, you name it, entomologists. Just the other day in my advanced poetry class, we had one of our students writing about how one particular kind of spider was the only one to have knee joints. I mean, the kind of rabbit holes you sort of navigate your way through. I think it's amazing when you think about the kind of education you give yourself just through general research. I find strongest writing tends to be writing that is well researched. Instead of making generalities or assumptions, researching a subject is a very good way to be able to explore the nuances. And if you are creating, I think, a metaphor for something, it makes that metaphor complete, and oftentimes a lot more enjoyable and understandable for your reader. I think for me too, and here's my hashtag real talk. View from True North. It was very difficult for me to write about my family of origin in certain respects. I think even in coming up in the 80s and 90s. A lot of us had alcoholic loved ones. A lot of us had domestic abuse. That's an unfortunate thing that I don't think has gone away. But I think that there was more of a, it was a little less socially acceptable to talk about it. I don't know. Every day I would come home from school and my auntie would be watching Oprah Winfrey. I always kind of you began to sort of see those sorts of things talked about in sort of general parlance. And I think that, you know, we as a society have opened up. And for me, I feel as a professor, as a poet, as someone who's interested in this, it was after 9/11 that I think people really kind of pulled the Band-Aid off and really, you know, got real about things to a certain extent. There was always identity-based poetry. I mean, you know, don't get me started talking about Sharon Olds and, you know, the Confessionals and Louise Gluck and Lee Young Lee and everybody. But I really do think that for sort of a, you know, this sort of the next crop of poets, 9/11 sort of marked a really special place to start really kind of delving mercilessly deep. So for me, I think one way that I could mediate that was through logos. And what better logos is there but science? And I already am kind of a nerd. So I was thinking, how can I think about my grandfather's you know, loss of memory? He did all of these things to the family. He philandered. He was an alcoholic. He was physically abusive. You know, how do I talk about that without writing what Kim Adanizio would call VICLIT, victim literature, right? That's not always the best approach either. Well, to me, it made sense that his glial cells and his neurons seemed like they were doing something kind of like a solar tempest, right? They seemed to me like the lights out in Alaska. When I was thinking about, you know, sort of a lot of these poems, I was really interested in the way that starlings, because I was living in the Midwest and starlings had, you know, we're all over the place off of all of the interstates and the highways. You'd just see these big pulsing, beautiful, you know, kind of convergences of black birds. And I did some research, and evidently they've got these little cells in their brains that tell them how to move in tandem. So if I'm using the Hollywood squares of Zoom. If let's say I'm a starling and Lauren's right next to me, Lauren's a starling. If I move a little bit to the right, that's gonna, her, you know, whatever cell in her brain is gonna pick up on that, and she's gonna move a little bit. So suddenly it's like we're moving in tandem. And I thought, what a wonderful way to think about family legacy. What a wonderful way to think about trauma. What a wonderful way to think about the ways that we come to terms with these issues. Ways to meet the emotional with the logical. So it's, maybe I was hiding a little bit, and maybe I was just using what I knew. Great question. Hard question.
All right. The next question is also for you, Sara, from Heather. Sara is one of my favorite sonnet writers ever. I always turn to her and Patricia Smith. Will you talk some about that grand sonnet mind and how you find the sonnet to be so very much for you, elegy, and your work?
Absolutely. Heather is a good friend of mine. And again, thanks for the hard question. It's a good question. It's a necessary question. I teach Patricia Smith's sonnets a lot. I think they're amazing. In fact, I teach her many of her formal poems quite a bit. I think they're excellent. For me, I've always been kind of drawn to Motown Crown, because it's one of those Petrarchan crowns that you add that extra 15 on, and all the lines line up. And it's one of the best things I've ever read in my entire life. So if you haven't read it, you should absolutely read it. However, in terms of the sonnet, I'm attracted to it. Again, here's the scientist in me. The sonnet is nature's perfect argument. 8 lines, volta, sestet, right? And then if you're doing an Elizabethan, or if you want to call it a Shakespearean, you've got sort of the slow turn around 11, right? And then you've got your couplets of closure, which for me, I love the Shakespearean, because, you know, you can really kind of, you know, subtly, and if you've got any kind of, you know, ear for assonance and consonants and slant rhyme and all that, you can really have a lot of fun with it. But I think because especially I would say in the second collection, I was looking for, there's lots of sonnets in View from True North, but they're more sonnet sequences. I've got a lot of sort of just one, you know, kind of what I like to call one-off sonnets, just they stand by themselves. Because again, I think they function as a perfect way to distill an argument. And when you're dealing with something that can feel momentous, like grief, like sadness, something overwhelming, I'm gonna again kind of take something I read out of a Patricia Smith interview, where she said that sometimes the reason when she was writing Blood Dazzler, which is a wonderful book about Hurricane Katrina, if you haven't read it, you ought to read it. You know, she talked about her turn to form in that book because she felt that she had so much rage about what happened that she had to have a container to hold it. And I think similarly, when poets write about vulnerable material, and vulnerable can span the length of whatever that is, whether we're writing about natural disaster like Patricia was, or familial struggle or elegy, when you know, within the context of maybe our own lives, having a container, having a tight container that you've got to kind of figure out what you're saying in like 14 lines. For me, I needed it. I really did. So to me, it felt natural. Plus, I think when you read enough sonnets and you start hearing the beat, right? You start saying, peanut butter, that's 2 trochees. So I went to the store, I am to the store and a pest. You start finding yourself doing substitutions, right? You do it in kind of very low key ways. You start hearing the pulse. The pulse can help you organize it, I think. So and then I think just having that strong limit, that boundary to say, you can write about this, but you got to figure out how. You got 14 lines and go. That was very helpful for me.
Thank you, Sara Henning. One more question I think is all we have time for, and it's for Josh. So Josh, where did your interest in horror and other dark subjects like monsters originate? From Joshua Christian.
Thanks, Josh. Good question. I guess weirdly, I didn't realize that I had an obsession with the dark and the monstrous until I looked back at my novel, which was a dark gothic book full of monsters, and my short book of short stories, which is full of monsters, and my podcast, which is about monsters. And only then did it really dawn on me, I guess I have a deal or an issue with monsters. I don't know. And I think that happens to a lot of writers, that only at the later in your career do you, or sometimes other people, figure out what you're all about. You don't really know what it is sometimes while you're doing it. But that didn't really answer the question. Where did it begin? I think, well, my mom is in this Zoom meeting right now, so maybe I'll blame her. She read, how about maybe, let me pinpoint a literary pinpoint. How about this? There was a Sesame Street book featuring Grover called The Monster at the end of this book. And it told the great horror story, right? Where you fear the monster that is coming, and that has the tension that Allison was asking about. You know the monster is coming, and every page he's begging you not to do it. And so it's kind of a meta interaction with him. And then at the end of the book, you have the great horror reverse that we see once done so wonderfully in like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, where he realizes, oh, I am the monster, and I have been the monster all along. Let's call that the origin of my obsession. What a great book that was, by the way. And so thanks, Mom, for getting me obsessed with monsters.
That's absolutely adorable. That's a great origin for loving monsters as children's books and your mother. Love that. Thank you, everyone, for attending Crab Orchard Review's first inaugural reading with Josh Woods and Sara Henning. Allison, Joseph, if you have anything you would like to say.
Thanks everybody for being here this afternoon. We weren't sure what time of day was going to be a good time, but our turnout was amazing. 2 p.m. on a Saturday. So see you for the next readings. Thanks so much to our readers, the amazing Sara Henning and Josh Woods. Much gratitude from your friends in Carbondale, and thank my wonderful COR staff who has held it down and who has made things so much easier for me personally. So thank you to all of you for being here. Have a great afternoon.
Bye, everybody. We have recorded this, so if you want to